Here you can see side by side I open my Visual Studio Code Editor and I also open my browser using Live Server extension. And I already created an HTML file index.html. So first I'm going to create script tag. Inside this script tag I'm going to create a normal function. So I'm going to type function. And you can take any name for this function. I'm going to take gen for generator. And inside the function I'm going to print two statements, console.log message1 and console.log message2. So normally we can create our function like this. And whenever we need to call the function, just we need to type function name, gen. And that's it. And if I save this file, and you can see in my console, it print out all the statement, message1 and message2. We have no control here yet. To control this function, we need to convert this function into a generator function. So we need to use star sign before the function name, like this. In that way, we can convert this function into a generator function. If I call this function, it is not going to print any message in our console. Let me save the file. Here you can see, it do not print any message in my console, because now it's not a normal function, it's a generator function. And if I set this generator function into a variable, something like let a equal to gen, and return this function in our console. So I'm going to type console.log inside the parenthesis a. And if I set this file, here you can see it's written something. And if I open this drop down, it's a generator. And if I open this generator option, it provides some function, next function, return function, throw function. So using this method, we can do our further job. Mostly we use next function. So let's use this function, a dot next. If I save this file, now it is going to print our statements. Let's save the file. Here you can see it print our message1 and message2. And last it print value undefined and done true. It means there is no value after message2. But we already don't have any control in our lines. So we can use yield function to control these statements. So I'm going to use yield function after this message1. Yield, and I'm going to send a message, yield number 1. And also I'm going to call this yield function after message2, yield number 2. So when I call this function, it's going to print our first message. Then it's run the yield. Then it pause our code and stop executing other codes. So let me save this file. If I save this file, you can see it print out message1. And then our yield return an object. And here you can see it's written two value. One is done and another one is value. Done value is false. And inside the value it return our message, yield number 1. And we already know that why done value return false. Because there is another message in our function. That's why it return false. If there is no message in our function, then it's written true. We already learned about it in our previous videos. So now I'm going to call this next function once again. So I'm going to duplicate this line and save this code. Here you can see it's print our message 2. And if I call this function 3 times and save the file, it's written undefined. And in done value it's written true, because there is no third message in our function. And if I remove all the code and also remove the yield message and then set this code, it's written undefined. It's mean if there is a no value in yield, then it's written undefined. But if I assign any value, in our case m1 means message 1, and then set the file, here you can see in value it's written m1. Now I need my code back, so I'm going to press Ctrl Z and save the file. For better understanding, I'm going to remove these messages. And if I save this file, here you can see it's print yield 1 and yield 2. And it's written undefined because there is no third value for yield. So I'm going to create another yield in our function. So I'm going to duplicate this line and yield number 3. And if I save this file, now it's written false. And now I want to print yield 1 and yield 3. I want to skip yield 2. So for this, we need to call this function outside the console. So I'm going to type a dot next function. And if I save this file, here you can see it's print yield1 and yield3. So in this way, we can control this function. We can execute any particular section using generators. And as I told you in my previous video, if you want to print this value directly, just you need to use dot value. And if I save this file, you can see it print. You can see it's print our message directly. But what if we have 300 yield in our function? In that case, we can use for loop. Let me show you that. So I'm going to remove these lines and I'm going to type for, inside the parenthesis, let value of a. Then inside the loop, console dot log, inside the parenthesis, value. If I save this file, you can see in my console, it print out all the yield, no matter how many yield we use in our function. And now I'm going to show you a new method how we can use yield in a different way. For this, I'm going to remove these lines and I'm going to take a variable, let result equal to yield. I store yield value in a result variable. So we need to send the yield value. For this, I'm going to remove this line and I'm going to type a dot next. So whenever I call the next, automatically it calls generator function. And I'm going to duplicate this line and I'm going to pass the value 300. Now this value set to be yield value and we pass the value in a result variable. And also I'm going to print this value in my console. So I'm going to type console dot log. Inside the parenthesis, I'm going to use template string method. So I'm going to type backticks. Inside the backticks, I'm going to type result colon $sign. Inside the curly braces, I'm going to pass this variable result and semicolon to end this line. So if I save this file, you can see in my console, it's written 300. Basically, I'm going to set yield value outside to the function. In our normal function, we send value as a parameter and then we create arguments here to save the value in a variable. And if I use a.next function 2 times and send value as a parameter, it's going to set the value as a yield value. Not only that, we can calculate our value. I want to multiply this value with 10. Star 10. So if I save the file, you can see in my console, it returned 3000. Not only that, we can send multiple values. So I'm going to duplicate this line and I'm going to send 400 and 600. But if I save this file, it's going to return only one result because we use yield only for one time. So I'm going to save this file. Here you can see it's written our previous result, 3000. To get the all result, we need to create an array. So I'm going to remove this line and I'm going to use square braces. And inside the square braces, we need to type yield. And we need to type yield 3 times because we pass 3 value in our next function. So I'm going to type comma yield comma yield. So for 300, it's going to use this one. And for 400, it's going to use this second yield. And for 600, it's going to use third yield. So if I save this file, it's going to return an array. Let's save it. Here you can see it's written all the result as an array from. But if I send another value, so I'm going to duplicate this line. Here you can see we just use 3 yield in our array. So it's going to return nothing. If I save this file, you can see there is no changes. And now I want to see the third yield value. For this, we need to type. For this, just we need to use square braces, and inside the square braces, we need to pass the array number 2. Because our array starts with 0, so for our third array, we need to pass 2. If I save this file, it's going to return only third yield value, 600. So in that way, we can check particular yield value. And obviously, we can pass string value inside the next function. And now I want to pass single value with yield, and I also want to pass array value with yield. So I'm going to remove this line and I'm going to type yield. Here I'm going to type 44. And in our next yield, I'm going to pass an array. Inside the square braces, I'm going to pass PHP, Python, JavaScript. And now I want to read their value. For this, I don't need this line, and I'm going to move this line inside the console. So I'm going to type console.log inside the parenthesis. Inside the parenthesis, I'm going to pass a.next and then semicolon to end this line. And I'm going to duplicate this line. Our first next function for our first yield and our second next function for our second yield, which is an array. So if I save this file, you can see in my console, it returned our first value 44 and also it returned our array. And if I open this array, you can see it has 3 values: PHP, Python and JavaScript. So in our generator function, when we use multiple yields, we can take single value, we can take array, and also we can use objects. So we can use any type of value with yield. This time I want each array value came separately. So I'm going to use star sign here. So if I save this file, it's going to return our first array value, PHP. And if we want to see the second array value, we need to call this function once again. If I save this file, here you can see our second array value, Python. And for our third value, we need to call again. Here you can see it's written JavaScript. But if I call this function once again, it's going to return undefined. So we can print array value differently. Just we need to use star sign with yield. In our next example, I'm going to use yield with spread operator. So I'm going to remove these lines and also I'm remove this one. In our first yield, I'm going to type PHP. In our second yield, I'm going to type Python. In our third yield, I'm going to type Java. In our fourth yield, I'm going to type HTML. And it is enough for this example. And now I want to print the first yield value in our console. So I'm going to type console.log inside the parenthesis a.next. And I want to print their value directly. So I'm going to use dot value semicolon to end the line. If I save this file, you can see it's print only PHP. But for the remaining values, we can use spread operator. So I'm going to duplicate this line and inside the console.log section, I'm going to type square braces. And inside the square braces, I'm going to type 3 dots. We learned about spread operator in our previous video. So I'm not going to explain it here how it's work. Then I type our variable name, A. If I save this file, here you can see it print all the remaining yield value in an array. We know spread operator return array. But if I call this line 2 times and save this file, it's going to return our first 2 values and remaining 2 values is return array because we use spread operator. There is another function that we can use with generators, which is return. Let me show you this. So I'm going to remove this line and I'm going to type a.return function. Here we first call our next value, mean PHP, and then I call our return function. If we use return, it stops executing our other yields. And also we can send message with return. So I'm going to type end. So if I save this file, here you can see it print our first value PHP. Then it's return end, means our return message, and also print true. And we already know when it's written true. If there is no other yield in this function, then it's written true. Let me show you. If I try to print this next function after the return and save this code, it return undefined. But you can see in my function there are other 3 yields. Its main is not going to execute other line of codes because we use return function. When we call return function, it cannot read the next codes. The main benefit using return function is when we have to stop our code middle of the execution, then we can use return function. So I hope now it's clear for you what is generator and why and how we use it. Thanks for watching this video. See you in the next tutorial.